the most interesting part, which we will just work together in, and this is the composition sheet and inventory. And I would, and there are different ways to approach this, right? I mean, like, I would use what considered to be more or less, again, common industry knowledge optimal, and it goes through the conversation and the composition participants of all of the disciplines. And by that, what I mean, I'll start like with the character, because NPC character, because it's probably the most intuitive way to go into that. And let's say you have a character. At this point, we do understand that this character is described. Description is here. By this factor of this descriptions being here, we know that it also consists, in some sense, by logics, because description is often going from the design, and that would be design and narrative. Like, let's put it, logics and the backstory, logics and lore, a little bit easier. Function, content, and that would be art. We know that there is content, model, textures, animations, etc. Right? We know that there is also mechanics associated with the logics and behavior, and it's like features, action, etc. Sounds kind of logical, but this is where we're getting into a very interesting ground where in reality people from art, people from art, design, and engineering, again, they don't really understand each other to the point where you expect they would understand each other. And because of that, you need to go through this exercises where we're taking our guy and we call his name is Dredge. And we're going through the basic description in the form of a free narrative brief. It's a page description, let's say, and there is like times ago, human souls, like being trapped into... I'll make it a bit more simple for you. Don't worry, I don't want to write the whole page. Being trapped, and that's like the lore part, and then they go for like whatever. They can be encountered in one or groups, weak enemies, use guns and machine guns. I was just making shit up, like it's not important, right? And they have no special skills, but they can be led by Alpha Dredge, who influenced that stuff, and they can use covers, and then they can get very angry and explode next to Cat. That's enough for the explanation. And that's design, right? I mean, like, but these are like descriptors. They're all around the place, and they are not specifically useful for anyone at the team at this point, because they are not really telling specific things, and it cannot be put into production in this way. So we need to put it into the functional design first. We need designer to be able to think function, and this is why I'm telling for years at this point. So the technical artists, and we need to have technical designers and the functional designers in the first point, because otherwise it all becomes a mess and people just don't understand each other. And we need to turn it into the actual logical things in the forms of briefs. As I said, that this times ago, so being trapped, like for design and narrative, what does this mean? Probably some descriptors. We presume that there is a lore in the game, so maybe there are some objects with text and dialogue, and we effectively just go through like everything that can be a functional element related to these things that we want to relate into the game world, which are related to the specific characters, can be encountered in one of the groups. Now, it's an interesting one. It means that the assumption that they can work in the groups presume that there is a group intellect, and that means that, just logically, that they behave differently alone and the groups, and that probably would be a just assumption. Weak enemies use guns and machine guns. It means that a whole bunch of things from the point of view of design. It means that they can use various objects. I would leave it like here. I have no special skills. Okay, there are skills in the game, guys. I can be led by Alpha Dredge. That's again group intellect, proximity effects, etc. though at this point I'm doing what engineers would do. Can use covers of in active interaction with environment. Can get very angry and explosion mechanic. And that goes with explanation. And now that goes to art, right? And when it goes to art person starts to think about the things that design came up with very differently. It's like going about like the first element, like descriptors. They're like, okay, that's easy. That's some objects with textures. Probably there's conversation on how exactly do you want that to be expressed through what mediums and stuff, and they come up with a conclusion of how the specific characters should be presented into the world of mediums. How lore works in general. Can be encountered in one or in groups. That's not really relevant for art, except this is a very experienced art, and then they would talk again with the engineering and the design. And the question here would be like with many other various questions is that behavior visually very different from when they do things alone, and are the ways that we show an effect of the group to the player somehow, with some special effects, with some UI, UX, probably shoot, maybe with some animations. And the question like here and in many other cases would be auxiliary cons, and can use various objects and the guns and the machine guns. That's important question. Animation, attachment, modules, special effects, SFX, VFX, dependencies, and so on. Skills in the game, also again question about how we visualize it. So you kind of get it, right? Like covers are like additional animation set and so on. It's get even more trickier when it gets to an engineer, because like engineer looks into this whole gig and they start to asking even more questions and making even more assumption based on what being described through general description, design and narrative, art components, and now it's in the hands of the function. And so we basically are saying that this is irrelevant for engineers. Like really, well, I mean, unless there is something specific for the way you show it and the way you communicate, like, and this is the first question for all of this description where engineers are like, so alright, so the actor character has inventory if there are objects for lore and stuff like that, right? Then it goes to weak enemies and can be encountered in one of the groups. A whole variety of questions of AI behavior, navigation mesh, again proximity, triggers and effects, etc. Inventory are available for NPC as well. Probably we'll ask a bunch of questions about the guns, because this is the point where we're talking about them and we started with the character. About like would it be ballistics or the instigate, you know, like, or whatever, just questions. This game is all about the questions, because you want everyone to ask as much questions as possible for anything that was missed or will be missed in general. And each feature and each entity like character is effectively a feature. Gets into those descriptions, and then at some point you finalize all of the things associated as a various form of dependencies for a character named Dredge to function properly into the vertical slice. And you build the dependency chart. I mean, like you build like the dependencies where you have like Dredge, who is dependent from aspect 1, 2, 3, you get it. And those aspects might be dependent from each other as well. So they can be interconnected in all of the variety of ways. And often, and we will get to this very soon, those elements will be produced at the different elements of the pipeline at different parts of your production. So you cannot really effectively do any animations before you get the model and before you get the skeleton being done and the rigging's been done. So you have dependencies, and at the end of the day, because this is what we're looking here for the estimate of one position in principle, you will have something like, again, Dredge character, model, textures, animations, VFX, associated SFX, features, and then you will have integration, and then you will have tests, and then you will have tweaks and polishing, and then you will have final integration into the build. Not ready, right? And what you want to get here is an information. You want to have like a singular position effort estimation. And let's say that the model will be 120 hours, texture 40. Well, all of the block of the animations would be 160 because it's a complex character, I don't know. VFX would be like 4 effects, like 10 hours, which is 40 hours. And sound would be like, if we're doing this specifically for this one character and we're not talking about voiceover, because that would probably be voiceover, but we're talking about just the SFX would be another 20 hours. The features associated would be another 80 hours, maybe, you know, like, I don't know, well, actually it's more, it's about 240, and let's keep it real. Integration is quick, that's at 10 hours with all the setups. If people who are using the tools know what they're doing, testing is probably about additional 20 hours for all of the various situations that we have discussed, and polishing is another week, you know, like by one person, with final integration being the same 10 hours. What you will see is that most probably you'll get upset at this point, because it will take 700 hours for simple NPC characters to be implemented into a game, and just, you know, like, if you're wondering, one key NPC, if you're doing just that, being spread, it's a 4.5 months of one person. It's not one person though, I mean, like, but again, when you first do that for one position, this is an upsetting number. So what you're gonna do next is that you want to understand that effective and optimal works when you have number of things like this is a dredge character, right? You know, like, and you gonna say that you will have overall 10 NPCs. Estimations also help you to keep things real, you know, like, it's not like when you do those things and when you show all of these elements, you kind of can cut this bullshit conversation when someone goes for like, oh, my neighbor's son is a modeler, he can make this model and he showed me in Roblox for 2 days, right? Well, fuck, I mean, like, if you do shit for the 2 days, you get the Roblox character who can be used only in a lame context, and that's made by children for children, and we're building a different context game. It's much more complex, but you need to be able to show all this stuff. And I'm omitting here a whole bunch of things, because, like, and you need to understand, so I'm simplifying. So animation, for example, what's the animation? And this is the questions when you need to start asking yourself where you can optimize things. You need to know how they work. I'll take an animation as example. So you have 10 NPCs, and 6 of them are, 4 of them I need to be careful from the point of equality here. 4 of them are male and 4 female and 2 unique. They are monster animalistic, let's put it this way. And it kind of helps you from the point of view, because, like, if we'll discuss animation pipeline, again, a bit simplified. So we go for, like, there is a model, and then there is a skeleton, and there is rigging. Let's say you do mocap. It would be easier for me to presume that that would be motion capture animations. And then you need to clean up mocap animations from twitching and from all of the negative artifacts. And then you make all that work together, kind of. And then something is not, and then you're fixing things up. Because, like, those 3 things, these 4 things is what you will be doing in game development most. If you think it's kind of fun, and then think about this statement, it kind of works. And we would say that for one character, like, this is exactly this 160 hours and the model was ready. You do not do it before. But then you start to look at the things that you can optimize here. And you start thinking about your project as the larger entity, with an understanding of how your elements structured, how you basically large feature structured, and how your production pipeline of one feature structured. You want to add to this equation an understanding of how each discipline specific pipeline is structured, to start putting this to a happy medium. And what I mean here is that, like I said, so we have 10 NPCs, like over here, and they are like 4 male, 4 female types, and 2 monsters, uniques. Let's put it uniques. What that means is that like, you can, at this point, you can optimize use of the skeletons for male and female animations and cut the work twice on this specific element. Right? Makes sense, isn't it? You know, but it's people just do stupid shit all the time, and I cannot even stop enumerating where I had situations working with people I would basically say that each of our NPCs are unique ones. We would literally just develop a separate skeleton and go again for all of these procedures from each of the characters. And sometimes it's not very obvious why people do that, because let's say you decided to save yourself time and you outsourced the full cycle of animation to 4 or 5 different places, and that means that they would produce things as they think fit, right? And that will influence your stuff. And so this is the first element where you really save your work. You do same skeletons, and it means that you do the same riggings, and you really optimize on this one. And once you get to the mocap, you want to make this session once. You don't want to go to the studio 3 or 4 times. You want to make all of the characters. You want to make, your animations are the same. It means that their parameters of these models, at least for 4 male and 4 female, are kind of same in between this 4 and 4. And that means that you need to produce only 1 male and 1 female, and probably these 2 uniques. So you need 4 instead of 10. And you write down all of the list of these animations, you do video references, and you go and you make mocap. And they would use the same models, the same dredge for all the male and dredge female for all the female. And then you would just replace models with other characters, and that would still work. It makes sense again. And you write down mocap once, and by that you're avoiding a lot of redundant overhead costs. But let's be realistic, you'll have at least 1 correction with the same studio, but that would be much less expensive. And so again, coming back here, what we're doing is that we're doing like initial decomposing. We understand the individual cost in hours of one specific model without optimization, and then by using understanding of the specific pipelines, we're starting to optimize this into the larger picture by, at this point, beginning to think about the timeline. Because again, when you start building things in a specific time, in a specific order, and you're trying to comprise some of these elements to do them once instead of doing them every time, and then you save yourself a lot of time. If you, for example, you took these NPCs, right? Or no NPCs, let's do stuff related to props. So we do props, and let's say like in the vertical slice you have how much? It's 8 locations like that, and you have North City, Detective, Supernatural, Square, Sunset. So it's a larger screen, it's prospect, it's a bunch of skyscrapers, and it's like sun is like that, right? I will put it here. So we have a situation like that, right? I mean, like when I start working on the props, I want to start in the grouping of props. I want to ask myself a question: what are they repeatable from the point of view of modeling? How many materials are actually using? Like, am I using for like tier 1 is complex. One's like car, it's a complex prop for like car 1, car 2, and then tier 2 is something more simple. It's like fridge, clocks, whatever, street lamp. Maybe it's a fairly complex. Maybe it's a complex street lamp. And that's like your basic props, like suitcase and a jug and some texture materials like puddle, graffiti, whatever, right? I mean, like I can separate it into groups, but you get the idea of this. And the question I'm gonna ask myself is like, how much these objects would be repeatable? How many actual suitcases I need this for a picture to look variable in the specific art style? How different they would look depending from the lighting I'm using, and how much actual materials I would be using at those specific objects. Like, these are the questions I want to ask myself. And then after those questions, I want to ask myself as well stuff like, what specific and tricky mechanics of using various approaches for optimization I can use to save on my performance, to save on actual work, and to save on without too much compromising the quality. Like, maybe I should be making procedurally generated houses. Probably can, depending from the camera I'm using, probably definitely can do that. And that means that I need to make a building set and start putting this in use. Can I use same model for the suitcases and use 4 various textures with the same material? Yeah, I can probably. I can do that as well. Materials I'm using, materials are expensive from the point of view of well, production, not just quality but also performance, and how many types of asphalt I will have in the game, how many type of pavements I have in the game. Probably not more than 2 or 3. And it doesn't make sense to use different for various locations, and even in the board of the vertical slice. I need to be smart about it. And so I will inventorize in this specific fashion. And like all of this thinking, all of these approaches will end up into specific tasks and into specific inventory. And this specific inventory will look something like that. It will be the features of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It would be content. It would be major characters, ropes, effects, whatever you do that, right? You know, like whatever you use from the point of view of toponymy, of and convenience, whatever works for you. And then it would be like additional stuff, like something that you cannot qualify to any of these groups. Would be like sounds and voiceover clips, and you would know in this inventory that each of those elements go deeper into the tier 1 as the specific 10 features. The specific 10 features comprised from the specific components. The specific components cost the specific amount of time, which we have optimized for the pipeline optimization because we're thinking about them in bulk, and this will influence how and when we produce them on a specific timeline. So I hope that this idea and this type of thinking, you know, like is something which is kind of apparent for you guys. And what we're gonna do here is that after you did all that, you move into the stage of creating, let's put it this way, it's production. You also, at this point, you need to understand the cost of integrations associated with the pipeline and timeline understanding. So what one's done? Now, what we want to do here at this point, what we gonna do now is effectively, I'm gonna show you how timeline works.